and welcome. This is the Friday edition of the Patriot Radio News Hour with your fill-in hosts, Brian with the Y and Jason there at the station in Johnstown, Colorado, coming at you live this Friday, the 6th day of September. Yay, we made it. Nice short week. Jason, what's happening? Nice Good Morning show that you did. I didn't quite finish listening to it, but interesting stories.
Yeah, just about some, life can be ironic, the positions they put you in. And I'm one of those guys that I feel like you should stand your ground, and what you think is right, you should stand up to it. And quite frankly, men nowadays are told to stand down, in your private.
Toxic masculinity, right?
Yeah. Yeah, precisely.
What is that?
So you won't get to hear that on. So Brian's coming in on a much clearer piece of technology here, and he can now hear things that he couldn't quite hear as much coming in through the phones on our other show. Because Brian he does most of his shows from home because he's got a full-time job, and that was the phone.
Because I hide out in the mountains of the northern Front Range of Colorado.
Correct. Yeah, that was the business phones, which are a much more pleasant, quieter tone, and you were able to hear it now. So, anyways, as we were talking the show before, if you guys there in Arizona haven't heard the show, you can go to 1360khnc.com and stream in our shows. We have podcasts of most shows. We don't have a podcast of the Good Morning Show, do we?
That one is not being podcasted.
No, so you guys will miss out. But basically, in my past, I have a few instances of injustices that seems to be thrust upon me, and I was covering a lot of those on the morning show. And it's funny that now suddenly, it wasn't my life's dream to be on the radio doing shows, but here I am running a radio station, and suddenly the guy that had several instances in my past of injustice, suddenly I can bring them to the air and have people talk about their situations. It's an interesting path I've led, right, Brian?
Yeah, you know what, Jason? Some of the stories that you tell, it reminds me my 3 years younger brother, very successful business owner grew to that with an excavation business, but he had some parallels in his life, and so I got to live vicariously through his exploits and run-ins with the authorities. Let's just put it that way. And he and my late father had some very similar some bents, if you will. They just very similar to what you were talking about, Jason. If they're being told something that doesn't agree with what they want to do or what they're doing, there's probably going to be a little bit of a confrontation going on.
Well, and I think you've personally witnessed that little bit of that attention that I draw. I have this natural ability to draw that I can just look at a guy, and you can tell sometimes by looking at me that I'm not going to take your crap look. You can do and say whatever you want, but I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to let you get away with anything. And you personally, we had that Ted Nugent event there in Windsor, Colorado. And you went to that, and we decided, you and me and one of our advertisers from Aluminum Wire, Bob, we went to that watering hole afterwards and had a drink. And remember that one woman? I was playing Rammstein on the jukebox, right? And she had physically attacked me because she didn't like Rammstein. Remember that?
Physically, yeah. She physically grabbed your neck or something. And you know what? I blame it's all Ted Nugent's fault because he got us all fired up at that Sheriff Steve Reeves, that Weld County Sheriff rally. Yeah,
some drunk woman did not like Rammstein and decided to. She was trying to pull me off my bar stool. This is a big woman. This is a big girl, right? And she was going to throw me to the ground or something. But I'm too stout to be drugged down that easily. And
that's one thing. If she doesn't, I'm sure a lot of people don't care for it. But to go throw you in a headlock just out of the blue is kind of provoking, if you will, right. Toxic masculinity or not.
Right, and for anyone listening, I think Joe has a beer more regularly than I do. I mean, Brian likes to have a beer. I don't drink hardly at all. Probably about once a month, maybe. Depending on the year, once every 2 or 3 months, I might go out and have a few drinks with friends. So I rarely go out like I used. I used to be like a once a week kind of guy, but that's way in the past. As soon as I had a baby, I decided drinking was not a good idea. But
besides the fattenings.
Yeah. Well, but when I go out, I like to have fun. And the way I look at it, a bar is a place you go not to be bored. People don't go to a bar to be bored. They go there to have fun. And so a lot of times it's just the mix of company that turns into the fun. And usually I get a little snarky, and I like to take a few jabs at people verbally just to see what kind of people I'm sharing a room with. And most of the time everyone's just fine. Everyone can have a good laugh, And
hey, every military excursion has to have probes to go check what the environment is like, and that's I think you're following that tactic.
Exactly. So, hey, Brian, you talked to me briefly before the show. We're going to be hitting our first break here in about a minute. Joe actually said he saw a Zero Hedge article about 9/11, and since we may not be on the air next week, unless maybe Joe invites us to come on, we'll see. Joe's a lot more conservative than Brian and I. We like to shoot off whatever comes into our brains, and Joe wants to make sure that we're as professional as we can be, because we got to sell gold and silver. So that's why we don't get a lot of shots on the Arizona show as much as Brian and I might like. But
you know what, Jason?
You're going to cover that, right? Oh, go ahead.
With our debut of Leg Tacos, our first show, that's well, that's deserved that Joe has some reservations.
Technically, I think our opening show is the Titanic.
Oh, okay.
And we got this huge response, and I think we've pivoted into Leg Tacos after, because we wanted to keep the shock value going. And
we were just setting the bar really high and then really low, and knowing that we needed to come in between those two. So that's
exactly.
There was a method to it.
But Joe basically said he saw the Zero Hedge article, so we're gonna go with what Joe sort of pointed us in a direction. Brian and I have a much more stronger idea of what happened on 9/11. So I'm gonna let Brian's going to bring this article in. We're going to talk about what the government really is capable of doing, what these elitists, these bankers, killing people is just okay in their book. It is really okay. This is a part of their plan. We'll be right back. We'll cover this article.
Stay tuned. Yay, we made it. It's, by the way, National Read a Book Day. I don't know, Jason.
Wow. I mean, Brian and I on our show, if you're listening in Arizona, we've been covering these national days they set up, and they have them for everything. I mean, it's just, National Q-Tip Day. Is that going to be the next one, right, Brian?
Probably.
So, all right. Well, go ahead, Brian. You brought this to my attention. I want to hear this thing.
Yeah, you know what, Joe? I give credit where credit's due. Joe brought it to my attention, and this is on Zero Hedge. Major university study finds, quote, fire did not bring down Tower 7, Building 7 on 9/11. And
let me add one thing. I'll add one thing.
Yeah.
The 9/11 Commission did not even discuss or talk about Building 7 at all.
I've heard
that had a fatal collapse at like the other two towers, but had no plane hit it.
That's right. No plane. And I've Architects and Engineers for 9/11 is one group that I initially followed. They were talking on the technical terms of things and just how things didn't line up with Building 7. And repeatedly, it was suggested that if you want to have conversations with people, have it start on Building 7, because the most anomalies there are surrounding Building 7. And I'm rusty on this. I didn't do any much prep at all. But there were some questionable federal offices that were housed in Building 7. I believe there were quite a few documents that were stored, sensitive documents, and I can't remember which agency. If it was the FBI. Or the CIA may even had an office there. There were investigations. There were documents about those investigations.
I think the Pentagon. Had stuff. The Pentagon had some stuff there too, I think.
Yeah. I remember.
Very federally important building.
It wasn't just an office building of commercial business offices. Although I think there were some of those in Building 7, and quite the tower too. It was 47 stories.
Yeah, that's a big building, man. That's a big building. It's also a white building, too.
Yeah, I mean, it was dwarfed by the Twin Towers, but still, in the Denver skyline, I'm not sure what the tallest building is, but 47 stories, it's a massive one. The building owner that was recorded saying, pull it, the first responders, radio communications that were saying pull back, they're pulling the building, they're pulling it. The visuals, the way that it collapsed nicely into its own footprint, and that's that point there. Getting back to this Zero Hedge article, I'll just start reading.
Let me say one last quick thing. CBS News actually said that Tower 7 was falling before it fell.
Yeah, you're right. There was a foreign correspondent. I don't remember if it was in England that they were there present, and I don't know if it was a period of time before it actually collapsed. They had announced that.
The story was already in place, and somebody reported it, and then the building fell.
Yeah,
that you can't. That's crazy stuff. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
Yeah. September 11th, 2001, at 5:20 p.m., World Trade Center Building 7 suddenly collapsed into its own footprint, falling at free fall speed for 2.5 seconds of its 7-second complete destruction. WTC-7 was not hit by a plane. After it collapsed, Americans were told that office fires caused a unique, never-before-seen, complete architectural failure, leading to the building collapsing into its own footprint at the rate of gravity. That's what that free fall represents.
It's called BS. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, Bravo Sierra. Despite calls for the evidence to be preserved, New York City officials had the building's debris removed and destroyed in the ensuing weeks and months, preventing a proper forensic investigation from ever taking place. Got to hide the evidence, right? Kind of like with Oklahoma City.
Right.
Move all that building material, the evidence, to a military base, and then keep it under armed guard. 7 years later, federal investigators concluded that WTC-7 was the first steel-framed high-rise ever to have collapsed solely as a result of normal office fires. Chairs, desks, paper, those types of things. What's paper burn at 451 degrees in ideal conditions?
The largest terrorist attack in the history of the United States, and that's when a building miraculously falls because of a building fire. That's the time that a building falls because of a building fire.
Yep. I'll just keep reading rather than add my shotgun commentary. Naturally, skeptics...
It's good.
Pardon?
Comment is good. Comments are good, man. I like it. Go ahead.
Naturally, skeptics have been questioning the official story for some time, and after moving from the realm of conspiracy theory, there's that term, into the realm of science, an extensive university study has found that the official story of fire causing the collapse is simply not true. This week, architects and engineers, there we go, I didn't even realize that was in the article. Architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth announced their partnership with the University of Alaska Fairbanks in releasing a draft report of an in-depth 4-year study on what actually brought down Building 7. According to the press release, the release of the draft report begins a 2-month period during which the public is invited to submit comments. The final report will be published later this year. According to the study's authors, the UAF, that is the University of Alaska Fairbanks, I lost my place. The UAF research team utilized 3 approaches for examining the structural response of WTC-7 to the conditions that may have occurred on September 11th, 2001. First, we simulated the local structural response to fire loading that may have occurred below floor 13, where most of the fires in Building 7 are reported to have occurred. Second, we supplemented our own simulation by examining the collapse initiation hypothesis developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, federal government agency. Third, we simulated a number of scenarios within the overall structural system in order to determine what types of local failures in their locations may have caused the total collapse to occur as observed. After conducting comprehensive modeling and studying countless scenarios, the study's authors, J. Leroy Halsey, Ph.D., P.E., S.E., UAF, Zili Kwan, Ph.D., Bridge Engineer, South Carolina Department of Transportation, and Fang Zhao, Ph.D., Associate Professor, Nanjing University of Science and Technology, Department of Civil Engineering, concluded the following. Lots of, those were 3 guys and lots of titles and credentials along with their names. Fire did not cause the collapse of WTC-7 on 9/11, contrary to the conclusions of NIST and private engineering firms that studied the collapse. I think Popular Mechanics is one of those that help perpetuate the lies and deceptions. The secondary conclusion of our study is that the collapse of WTC-7 was a global failure involving the near simultaneous failure of every column in the building. The results of the study cannot be dismissed. It completely destroys the narrative that has been shoved down the throats of Americans for nearly 2 decades. What's more, the study backs up thousands of other researchers, scientists, and engineers who have been pointing this out for years. In fact, as TFTP reported in July, TFTP, I'm not sure what that acronym is, history was made in regard to 9/11 as New York area fire commissioners called for a new investigation into the tragic events that unfolded that day. The resolution calls for a new investigation due to the overwhelming evidence that pre-planted explosives, let me quote that, quote, pre-planted explosives caused the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center buildings.
Yep.
On July 24th, 2019, the Franklin Square and Munson Fire District, which oversees a volunteer fire department serving a hamlet of 30,000 residents just outside of Queens, New York, became the first legislative body in the country to officially support a new investigation into the events of 9/11, according to Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And I think their website is ae911truth.org, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. That's great resource and a great collection of professionals, again, architects and engineers that have very credible credentials to be questioning these lies that, as the article said, have been pushed down our throat, Jason.
Yeah, well, and I think I might have something loaded we could play on the next segment, but what the jet fuel that supposedly melted the beams, which actually physically can't happen, it just can't happen. It didn't happen that way. They used if you want to blame the government, and I really think the government definitely knew this was going to happen. This was a pre-planned event. The temperature of the jet fuel burned 200 degrees at the hottest that jet fuel burned 200 degrees less than the molten metal. Now check this out. They said that these planes, the jet fuel, melted the beams on buildings 1 and 2.
Which I think required over 1,200 degrees to do that, 1,250 degrees to melt the beams.
Correct. And they had molten metal for up to 6 weeks, definitely up to the last 3 to 4 to 5 weeks after the buildings came down, of molten metal.
They called them foundry, like at a foundry, pools of molten metal that continued to remain hot.
I'm going to try to get those. I'm going to try to get the witness testimonies from the firefighters from the Zeitgeist documentary, but taken from the guys that were there at the scene, said that the molten metal was coming down these channels of the rubble like a foundry. This metal burned for weeks afterwards, hotter than the temperature of jet fuel burning. What this is called thermite. Thermite is a combination. This is a chemical thing. It's basically rust, iron oxide, with aluminum set off by magnesium. And all those big, huge clusters of clouds of stuff that you saw, well, that was thermite can melt through an engine block. Once you set it off, it burns so hot it would melt right through your car's engine, right through a solid piece of steel.
Well, the architects and engineers talked about using, there's thermite is one thing, and then there's nanothermite, and they talked about nanothermite likely being painted in a liquid form, painted on the columns, and then set up just like you described, Jason.
Correct. And so even if for some reason you believe in your mind that this was a terrorist attack conducted by Muslim terrorists, which I am coming to believe that. I'm not even sure there were terrorists on the planes themselves at all. I think it's quite possible these planes were taken like a video game, because you can take control of these planes remotely.
They were remotely controlling planes, Jason, in World War II.
Yep.
They were remotely controlling bombers, and I think there was a Kennedy. Wasn't there a Kennedy's son that was in the Army Air Force that was proofing some of that?
Correct. So that's quite possibly what happened, because some of these terrorists are believed to be alive today still. But that to the side, the thermite. If you really truly believe that the jet fuel burned these beams, and these beams were when they built the building, they actually talked about planes hitting the buildings, and these beams, the 47 core beams, were meant to take multiple hits by planes and never be bent. But if for some reason you believe, let's just say for some reason in some world, the jet fuel just was hot enough to cause this pancake collapse, why was there molten metal in Building 7? There was no jet fuel there. And when you have molten metal in all 3 buildings and all 3 pancake collapsed, it makes no sense. It's just that people got so angry, just like during World War II and Pearl Harbor. Before Pearl Harbor, 83% of Americans wanted nothing to do with World War II. They said, let Europe have their trouble. But after Pearl Harbor was allowed to happen, FDR allowed Pearl Harbor. They provoked Pearl Harbor to happen. 1 million men signed up. They needed a 9/11 event like they made, because they wanted to go and steal oil reserves and put the Federal Reserve System in place in all the Middle Eastern countries they can. It's all about assets. It's all about controlling financial markets. And
those that want to continue propagating these lies, Jason, they kind of wheel out the victims, the first responders, the 3,000, almost 3,000 individuals in the buildings. What better to serve their memory than to actually go after the truth and the perpetrators of what actually happened, versus letting that be used to shut us down? Kind of like anymore when people say, "Oh, you're a racist," just basically to shut you down and no longer allow any comment, questions, or conversation.
Correct. And if these so-called terrorists that were crashing these planes into buildings wanted to get the largest kill number, why were they hitting the building so high? Why didn't they just go down real low, get in the real low, trap more people up in those buildings? Because if they could have made those buildings, if this was a real terrorist attack and they made those buildings fall as they wished, they could have killed like 100,000 people. Those buildings were filled with 100,000 people. Why concoct this whole building hitting and melting beams? It's absurd. If you look at it closely, it is absurd. And I'm glad Joe brought that to your attention, Brian. We'll talk a little more. I think I got a piece we could play on the next segment. We'll be right back.
This is the Phyllis Schlafly Report, presenting a daily conservative pro-family perspective since 1983 and continuing the legacy of Phyllis Schlafly. Now here's the president of Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, Ed Martin.
In June 1939, more than 900 Jews escaping the horrors of Nazi concentration camps were sent back to almost certain death by Democrat President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. These men, women, and children were real refugees in need of asylum, but Roosevelt turned them away. That led to the preventable death of 254 innocent people. Despite this terrible injustice done to the Jewish people by a Democrat president, Democrats insist that they are the party of tolerance and compassion. If you actually look at the history books, it's easy to see the Democrat Party's long history of anti-Semitism stretching long before and long after World War II. Just over a month ago, a sitting member of the House of Representatives compared Jewish Israeli settlers to an infestation of termites. He is Representative Hank Johnson, a Democrat from Georgia. His words echo those of the bigoted Louis Farrakhan, who wrote a tweet saying, quote, "I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm anti-termite," end quote. Despite these despicable words, many Democrats will stand side by side with the likes of Johnson and Farrakhan. They don't mind being around anti-Semites when it suits their purposes. Many of these bigots hide under the guise of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, so-called BDS. Supporters of BDS say Israel should not exist and that Jews have no right to their houses, their lands, and their property. BDS proposes that the U.S. completely sever relations with the nation of Israel in the hopes that it will be consumed by the radical forces constantly pressing against it. BDS is hatred to the very core. This sort of thinking may be welcome among Democrats, but you won't find it in Republican camps. Conservatives recognize the right of Israelis to govern themselves. Republicans see the nation of Israel as a beacon of freedom and democracy in the middle of a region filled with hatred and tyranny. Israel has been a consistent ally of our nation in every struggle. The next time you hear a radical leftist college student, crackpot, or congressman talk about how inclusive they are, you just remind them which party says an entire nation has no right to exist.
This has been the Phyllis Schlafly Report with Ed Martin. Phyllis Schlafly Eagles are eagerly preparing for the 48th Annual Gateway Eagle Council to be held in St. Louis on September 13 to 15. Rally some friends for 3 exciting days of speakers, networking, and resourcing at the Gateway Eagle Council. Find details at phyllisschlafly.com. phyllisschlafly.com. See you there, and join us again for the Phyllis Schlafly Report.
This is the Patriot Trading News Hour. I am your guest host, Jason, joined with my partner, Brian. The number to call is 800-951-0592. We have silver. We'll get the silver special before we go back into 9/11. And I'm sure Arlene doesn't know about this, so Brian can text it in when he has a moment here. But we got silver. We got silver quarters, the 90% junk silver, a great way. We had a pullback yesterday. Gold and silver doing just fine, up a little bit. I think gold's up about $2. Silver, I think, is up a few cents. So the pullback is over. Gold held its position. So did silver. I mean, let's face it. On May 28th, silver was at 1474, and the last I saw a few moments ago, silver was at 1874. We got silver up $4 an ounce in just over 3 months. So I don't think yesterday's pullback is going to last very long. You're going to want to get in on this. So we got quarters at 150. We have silver dimes. If you want to go up to the smaller item, we can get those to you for $75. We are going to go ahead and continue with our Silver Eagle special from yesterday. We still have Silver Eagles, backdate Silver Eagles, $445 for a roll of Eagles, and we have a monster box, maybe or two. I think for definitely one. You can get a monster box of Silver Eagles, 500 ounces of silver, $10,990. You need to call 800-951-0592. We were getting ready to sell Eagles at $465, I believe, before yesterday's pullback. So getting Silver Eagles at $445 is a great price. Silver quarters, if you like, we got it. If you like government, if you like the new government coins, the Silver Eagles, you got a deal there. And if you like junk silver, pre-1964 silver, you got your choice today. Silver quarters at $150, silver dimes at $75, Silver Eagles at $445, and a monster box. You can grab it today at $10,990 at 800-951-0592, and get yourself some silver and protect your wealth today. Brian, let's continue on.
Yeah, real quick, Jason. I just wanted to put an exclamation point on that saying that a listener sent us several months ago, and that is that gold is the money of kings, silver is the money of gentlemen, barter is the money of peasants, but debt is the money of slaves. I love that one.
Great saying. It's so true. Also. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So, anyways, we were coming to 9/11 there, Brian. I was trying to explain some of the thermite, right? I got a piece to play. You let me know if you got another comment or two, but I can play some of this stuff. And I think I got it here.
Oh yeah. Oh, do you?
Yeah. If you want me to play it, I'll play it. Let me
hit it.
All right. Here we go.
I started looking at the molten metal. All three buildings, both towers, in the rubble, in the basement areas, and Building 7, there's these pools of molten metal.
It says, well over 6 weeks after the collapse, hot spots of over 2,000 degrees were documented.
Down below, you see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry.
Like lava on a volcano.
The molten steel was found 3, 4, and 5 weeks later, when the rubble was being removed.
That comment there was firemen that were doing the cleanup at the site. These are firemen there saying, "Look at the molten metal coming down the rails, the rubble like a foundry." So let me keep it going.
He said that molten steel was also found underneath World Trade Center 7.
So I'm looking through the official reports. What do they say about the molten metal? They say nothing. But wait a minute. This is important evidence. So where did that come from? Thermite is so hot that it'll just cut through steel, through structural steel, for example, like a knife through butter. The products are molten iron and aluminum oxide, which goes off primarily as a dust. You know those enormous dust clouds? You can imagine when you assemble these chemicals on a large scale.
I'm going to stop it right there, Brian, and that's just I wanted to get that in. It's hard for me to pinpoint the spot where the firemen are talking, but there are so many witness accounts on this documentary of the guys who were there, like numerous witnesses saying that these massive explosions before the planes hit, and there was 2 of them, one at Tower 1, one at Tower 2. And this thermite, the way that they show it is that these 47 columns, these core columns, these steel, the beams that hold the building up, the planes, even if they melted through those beams, there should have been beams still standing there, because those beams shouldn't have collapsed. If they melted through at, let's just say, floor 50, there should have been 50-story floor beams sticking up. They were not.
Been a partial collapse versus a complete catastrophic collapse.
I guess you could have had the floors do a pancake, but just like swords stabbing through something, there should have been these beams there with no floors and nothing else. In theory, you could have a collapse of the building structure itself, but the beams should still be there. And what they talked about, and there's pictures in very few. You have to really look, but there's pictures of these beams at the very bottom of the rubble, cut in a diagonal manner. When they use thermite as part of a controlled self-destruction of a building,
demolition.
Yeah, they cut them at a diagonal, and the thermite was probably set off. That's why with these explosions were at the beginning, to set the thermite off. The planes hit. It takes a while for that molten metal to really get up and hot, and it melts through these beams at the lower end, and the entire building comes down. And that thermite was probably at all different levels of the building, because they had to make these beams break into pieces so that there was nothing there to find. Go ahead.
Yeah, like a tower of sticks. Not all the sticks are going to be collapsed. You're going to have some sticks, some of those girders that are still maintained their structural integrity.
Yeah, those beams were so tall, Brian, that if you just cut them at the bottom only, they could the beams themselves could have fell over and crashed into buildings next to them. So that
fallen.
And the clouds of dust. Everyone remembers the pictures that if you remember that day, if you were watching, those clouds were covering almost the entire south end of the island there, Manhattan. And you wonder about all these guys that got cancer and died breathing the stuff. It's funny. I don't hear a whole lot of construction workers getting percentage-wise the amount of cancer and dying of these conditions than the guys at the buildings cleaning up the buildings. If you're breathing in iron oxide, which is rust, and you're breathing in aluminum, and you're breathing in magnesium, which is what they use to collapse these towers, that can make you very, very sick to breathe that stuff as many weeks as those people were breathing it in. Brian, sorry I cut you off, but I'll let you...
And that's yet another part of the crime.
Yeah, Brian. We'll bring it in. I'll let you continue. I've sort of sabotaged getting to that article, but we'll see. We'll keep finishing this off as we go. We'll be right back. All right. We got our own version of Jack Daniels Friday going on. This is the partners in Colorado, myself, Jason, and my co-host, Brian, from the Front Range News Hour here in Colorado. We're taking over for Joe to go watch his son play some college football. We got another 2 segments here. We're talking a little bit of 9/11 and how Brian and I are fully in the camp that this was a planned event. The United States government had something to do with it. More precisely, the elites, the bankers, those who want things changed so that they can financially profit from things like war. And there's plenty of evidence that these buildings did not do what they said they did originally from the 9/11 Commission. So, Brian, go ahead and start in from wherever you left off.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. This is for me. It's important to get to the bottom of the truth, and anytime there's any kind of cover up and lies, for me, that's just unconscionable for the victims, the individuals, the almost 3,000 lives that were taken. That were in the buildings, not to mention the brave first responders that both died immediately on that day, and those that slowly died in the months and years following because of, like you were just talking about, Jason, the particles, the particulate matter that they were told was safe with their little cotton masks over the nose and mouth. So just one crime begets another, and for me, I realize that this may be too much for some to contemplate and too disturbing, but if that's the case, don't resist it. Just listen to what we have to say, and if you have the time, do some of the digging on your own. And this fine organization, the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, I can't say enough good about them. And if from a technical and a engineering architectural perspective, start there and look at their evidence and the points that they make.
I'll say this: if you trust the government was protecting us and doing what they could after the events and during the events, if you actually believe that the government was not involved, then you're probably trusting the money they use and the Federal Reserve notes that they spend and you're probably not much of a gold and silver buyer generally. If you really believe the narrative, it's for me, gold and silver makes a whole lot of sense because it takes money out of the system. The system causes these events. I'm not saying that the government plans to kill people because just for fun. What I'm saying is the system demands that this Ponzi scheme grow and stay strong. And sometimes events have to be caused to create chaos.
By whatever means necessary, Jason. You're right. By whatever means necessary.
Yeah, create chaos in other countries to steal their assets. The CIA and our government, and the bankers, they want the entire world hooked to this drug called the Federal Reserve Note, central banking all over the world. And it's funny how the countries of the world that routinely on the nightly news are our enemies: North Korea, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Libya, Venezuela. It's funny how these are all the countries that are trying to stay out of the Federal Reserve System. They're trying to stay off of central banking or world banking. Those are the enemies. The enemies that we see on the nightly news are the ones that do not participate in central banking, or at least world central banking. And those are the ones that are punished. And it's if you really look at it into it and you really investigate all of these actions across the world, even the small ones, like in countries that we don't hear very much of, the CIA puts their dirty hands in these things and sets up ways of American companies and the American government and these central bankers to steal assets from these countries. It's played over again and again and again. And I think when the system starts to show its weakness, like it did in the turn of the century there, they move things forward with an event. And that's what 9/11 really is. It was an event. Look at, like, not even 10 years later, we're bailing out their system. We bailed out the bankers not even 10 years later. That shows you how bad the system was. They had to do all of these things to convince us to bail out the banks and give them, essentially trillions of dollars, because the system was going to die and we were going to suffer. Hey, you guys are going to suffer if you don't bail us out. It's absurd. It's completely crazy. And if you believe 9/11 had nothing to do with our government, or they had no knowledge of it, you're just wrong. In my mind, you're wrong. There's plenty of evidence that there was more than just planes and terrorists involved.
Well, and Jason, the crimes, the dastardly things that happened immediately after, like the EPA head saying it was okay for the first responders, it was safe to breathe the air, just with a minor protection. The steel debris that was hauled off, immediately shipped to China to be recycled. Of all places, it's almost like you get punched in the nose and then you get clobbered with a baseball bat just for good measure afterwards.
Precisely, I mean, it's like every detail of the story. It just shows, like, man. I mean, I just had it in my head, but there's just so many facets to the story that you can look at. Like, for example, the plane that crashed in the field in Pennsylvania. There's
Shanksville.
Shanksville. There's a big charred hole in the ground with nothing there, and
now there's a memorial. Now they've erected a memorial there.
But I'm saying when they found the supposed ground where the plane hit, there's nothing there. They said it disintegrated.
No plane wreckage.
Yeah, and there's plenty of field-wrecked planes throughout the world over the years, and what you see is seats, and you see wings, and the engines. So, like the Pentagon, for example, they use these titanium steel alloy engines. And they're saying when the plane, which I don't believe a plane hit the Pentagon, but when, there's no film, there's all these camera footage from all around the city that I could have seen. Those were all taken. All that footage was taken. You can't watch that.
None of it released to the public. Nope.
Yep. The engines supposedly disintegrated. Titanium steel alloy engines disintegrated, and the bodies of the people in the airplane were intact and left in the wreckage of the Pentagon. How absurd is that? No plane parts.
That's
right?
a great point, Jason. That hardened material, the leading edges of those jet engines. I've been watching on the Smithsonian Channel. I know I got to be careful. That's potentially propaganda as well. I've been watching a series called Airline Disasters. Every airline crash that I've watched so far, whether they're nose down, the plane falling apart, exceeding the speed that the plane was designed to withstand. There's parts. There's large parts. There's chunks of wing. There's, like you said, there's interior. There's seats. There's baggage items strewn everywhere.
Yeah, where's the molten metal in the Pentagon? So you think a couple of multi-ton jet engines would probably have left some molten metal if they disintegrated? Or how about right, Brian? the passport of one of the terrorists that hit the building in New York. The biggest piece of anything they found in those buildings was a 1-inch cube-sized piece of a telephone. That's the biggest material they could find inside the offices.
And the passport floats safely down and lands on the sidewalk.
Yep, there's a passport from a terrorist that just happened to be in the wreckage, sitting there unmolested and undamaged.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Final segment of the Patriot Radio News Hour. Your stand-in hosts, Brian with a Y and Jason from Colorado. Both of us coming at you live today. Hope we didn't startle you too much, but that jarred you to ask some questions. And before we get back into that, cover our today's special one more time. We're still carrying those U.S. Silver Eagles, $445 a roll. We have one, maybe more, but one for sure monster box. And that price is $10,990, 25 rolls, 500 coins, about 42 pounds. We also have the utility junk silver. I like to call it utility because I hate calling something of such utility and value as silver, calling it junk. But junk silver quarters and dime rolls. The quarter rolls are $150 per roll. The dime rolls are half that, $75. Give us a call, toll free 800-951-0592. It's as the transaction is complicated as how many of those do you want? So give us a jingle, Jason.
Yeah, great way to do it. Once again, the number 800-951-0592. Great time to be buying silver and gold. Don't feel like you missed the boat because it went up the last couple of months. It's just getting ready to go. Joe said it before in the last couple of weeks. It's getting ready. I believe this next election, once that's over with, we're going to have a large-scale economic event that's just going to send the markets spiraling downwards, and we're going to have an economy that could be much worse than the 2008 housing collapse. What do you think is going to happen to gold and silver then? How much of a warning do you need to get all your saved money into the right place than that? You know that there's going to be economic crashes. It's built into the system. It's a debt money system. The way this debt money system works is they have to have boom and bust cycles. They bring the assets up and then they crash them down. When they clear out what they think is all the suckers, they buy the assets at low prices and continually absorb what should belong to the people. They take it from us. Inflation and taxation steals our money from us. Gold and silver is your shield against these things, and you should get yourself right by putting those extra dollars that you don't need to have in silver and gold. So do it today. 800-951-0592, Brian.
And by the same token, what shenanigans will they attempt to pull to distract us from what's really going on, what's behind the curtain? But anyways, I can get back to this report. It goes on. We're about halfway through, but it's
you got about Brian, you got about 40 or 50 seconds before the music comes in. so if you
we're already there.
Yeah, we're already there. You can make a point or two. I mean, I don't know if we're going to be on the show on 9/11 next Wednesday. Hopefully, Joe will cover some of it. I know he doesn't do it every year. It's going to be 18 years, if you can believe that. And I believe fully that once this narrative gets further down, we're like 30 years away from it happening. That's when they'll start to admit, oh, you know what? There's something to all this conspiracy nonsense. Well, conspiracy science, I guess you could say, right, Brian?
Yeah, well, that's right. And the FBI, their involvement, and again, this doesn't condemn the field agents because my understanding was there were plenty of field agents trying to get their superiors' attention that something's not right, something's fishy going on. But anyways, thanks for being with us today. Have a great rest of your day and have a great weekend.
All right, and you should have Joe on Monday, so keep on listening. If you want, 1360khnc.com.